Karen, today we're going to talk about the dreaded K word.
There are so many things that could be.
Yes, but there's only one really, really in our world dreaded K word.
And that is?
Karma.
Oh.
Yeah. Now, the word has gotten some controversial attention of late, causing some people even deny that it exists or it's a part of our spiritual process at all. But what I want to know today is what exactly is karma? How does it really work? Why do we have to account for it? And how can we end up on the right side of it, right? Because no one wants to be on the receiving end of karma.
I want to know if I can stock it up.
That's a great question. Well, by the end of this episode, we're going to know everything we ever wanted to know and then some about this mysterious karma. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Well, here we go. My name is Will.
And I'm Karen.
And unlike Mulder and Scully,
we both want to believe.
So we've embarked on a journey of discovery.
We've talked to people deeply entrenched in the spiritual and metaphysical world.
We've thrown ourselves into weird and wonderful experiences. I even joined a coven of witches.
And wait, you joined a coven?
Yep, all in the interest of finding something.
Anything.
That will prove that there's something beyond this physical,
three-dimensional world we all live in.
This is the Skeptic Metaphysicians. Welcome to the Skeptic Metaphysicians. I'm Will.
And I'm Karen.
And today we are very fortunate to have soul architect Jessenia with us today, who is not only an acclaimed instructor at the famous Edgar Cayce Association for Research and Enlightenment, but she's also an Akashic Records guide and past life reader. Mm-hmm. Now, she has got the rare ability to access our deepest soul level experiences in order to help people heal through a process that she calls soul integration. And she just so happens to be the expert on the dreaded karma word. I watched her lecture at the Edgar Cayce Center, and she's got so much information. I don't know about you, but I've got my notebook ready, and I'm ready to take lots of notes. So thank you for coming on the show, Jessenia.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited.
I guess we just got to ask. It's a dreaded word. People are scared of karma.
I don't think it's dreaded. I've never heard of it being dreaded before. Why are you dreading it?
Because I have a lot of bad karma.
Oh, well, there's that.
And I'm afraid that eventually it's going to come back and hit me.
I've seen a lot of people use it as like a threat almost, like karma's going to come bite you in the ass.
Oh,
or
right. Karma's a bitch kind of thing, right?
Yeah. I see a lot of people use it as a threat. And that's kind of like the first thing that really got me into the subject is I realized how very little people knew about karma. You know, karma does not do our bidding. Karma is not our personal warfare tool. Karma does not stop in its tracks to make you feel better about your ego. I think that a lot of people have this dreaded relationship with it because they assume it's just this weapon that you use when you're angry. And it is not. It is not that at all.
Yeah, that's a good point because people do throw that word, your karma's going to suck. Karma's a bitch. Karma's coming for you, that kind of thing. But on the other side of the equation,
karma's only a bitch if you are.
I like that.
I think we found the title for our podcast.
See, I'm wondering which side of the karma coin you're on because I've just thought about good karma. Oh, you do this, you get good karma.
Yeah, well, better than most, actually, how bad my karma probably is right now. That I'm trying to make up for a lot of things. My entire life, I've done things questionably. So now I know that I've got a lot of negative karma banked. But that brings up your question, Karen. Jessenia, can you bank karma? Can you do a lot of good things and just keep banking it so that it negates all the bad crap you did before?
Well, I think it's important for us to understand karma altogether. Karma is what I like to call part of universal law. It's what keeps energy infinite. It is energetic accountability. So essentially, it's if we spend energy, we must replace what we spend. And therefore, it is like cosmic currency. You can spend it and owe some, or you can accumulate some. And then the goal is by the end of our experience here on Earth, we have come to karmic completion. We have come to a place where we are no longer in debt because we have been held accountable for those experiences or those lessons or those debts. But it isn't a form of punishment. I think that's like one of the biggest things people simply don't understand. We learn through experience here on Earth. We're humans of experience. So what happens is if we have a lesson or something, or we do something negative, we lose some of that karma. And then the idea is we learn through corrective experience. So for example, if I hurt someone, I make peace by helping them heal. If I took something, then I make peace by replacing that or creating some type of completion cycle with that. If I hurt someone, then I make peace by helping them heal from that pain or that wound. If I need to understand what it was like to be cheated on, then I might have a life where I get cheated on so that I could complete that karmic debt. We learn through experience, meaning like if I wasn't cheated on, I might not know what that feels like. So I might not feel compassion for someone else when I do the same to them. So we learn to have compassion. We learn to have experience. We learn to create completion, and then we find peace with it. And that helps us master Earth. So we definitely have situations where we have positive karma, and we definitely have situations where we have debts. And it's not a punishing system. It's a system of learning. It's a system of energetic accountability.
Will, you cannot borrow any of my karma.
Oh, come on. Just a little. You got so much of it.
Can you accidentally have bad karma? Like, can you do something without realizing you're hurting someone and then you're going to get, bad karma from that?
Absolutely. And sometimes we think we have bad karma and we actually don't. It's a very cosmic kind of game. So what happens is, now this is going to get really complicated for a second, but I can't really explain that process without talking about, incarnation in general. So what we all do before coming to Earth is we intricately plan our lives and our goals in the Akashic realm. And a lot of that is based around our karmic repayment plan, right? Which relationships we have, how those relationships function, what those lessons might be. And we have situations aligned for us to repay those debts and play those debts. So it's a very cosmic game, and it's tied to other lives and other experiences. So, for example, if it is a part of my story to repay my debt by, let's say, selling someone a crappy car, I might feel really guilty about that and not even know that that was a part of my story, that somehow this lesson was really important for them. And I might have written that into my story. And I might think, oh my gosh, I feel so bad. I would never do that on purpose. And then sometimes I overcompensate for that, even if it was a part of that plan somehow in that story. So many times what we find is we're helping other people pay back their karmic debts, and we don't even know that we're involved in it. We don't even know that we're doing that. We assume something's negative when it in fact is a repayment or a positive experience, or we assume something's positive when it sometimes is negative. Like one of those things is I get a lot of mothers who try to steal their children's lessons. If the child is suffering or struggling or dealing with some type of problem, the mom might try to scoop in and say, I'll deal with that. I'll handle that. I'll take that from you because I don't want to see you suffer. And that's negative karmic debt because you're stealing their lesson. They actually usually suffer more in the long run. They have to face that lesson when they're off on their own and you're no longer there to support them and love them and be kind of like a cushion for that experience. So we definitely have experiences where we are both confusing what's positive or negative. And that's, working with the records in past lives has taught me, if anything, that there really is no such thing as good and bad. There is only completion. There is only a lesson. And what we do with that lesson makes all the difference.
If I'm hearing you correctly, you're saying that our karmic accounting goes way beyond this lifetime. It goes past lifetimes that we're paying back for, things like that. So if that's the case, why is it that we don't have the ability to remember? Because I figured if you've done something in the past that you need to account for in this lifetime, you would want to remember it so you can make sure that you do that. So how can I pay something that I don't know I owe?
That is the beauty of spirit altogether. So, everything we do here is so much more difficult because Earth is such a dense atmosphere. The basis behind all of this not remembering, whether it's karmic debt, past lives, soul, origins, gifts, all of these things we forget when we come to Earth. That is because Earth is an incredibly dense atmosphere. It is the densest known to spirit and human alike at this very moment in time. So when we incarnate here, that density amplifies our emotional body. So we feel deeply, we feel powerfully, but that also snuffs and drowns our connection to anything else outside of this emotional experience. So it is very valuable to spirit because it is a densified energetic experience. So it has incredible value and power and potential for the cosmos, but it is also incredibly difficult to manage, which is, hey, we all know that because we're here, right? And it's a difficult game. And we're actually, as we experience Earth, we're teaching spirit because it is a unique experience and they're learning from us. They're learning watching us. They're learning while we manage this very difficult incarnation and experience. So the idea is once we clear that pain and that emotional body through repair, this is the whole basis of my healing modality. The more we heal, the clearer that connection becomes, the more we remember who we are, the more we remember those debts, those lives, those experiences, because we all have the ability to see or connect to our soul, our intuition. So that would mean your past lives, your gifts, and your why. Why are you here? What are you here to complete? Who's sent on that path for you? So we silence that voice created in trauma, and we help people manage and regulate their emotions. And then we help them find clarity and connection. And then that helps the remembering process.
That's complicated.
It is. It's like,
I mean,
I'm trying to figure out, where do I go from here?
Well, I'm still thinking about the example you gave with the mother and the child, because I'm a mother. And I mean, how do you know, like if your child is suffering and you're trying to do something to help that child, I mean, how do you know that? I mean, you might think you're building good karma by doing that, but then you're saying that you're stealing their lesson, which would not be good karma. I mean, how do you differentiate? How do you know? I mean, you could just be burying yourself in a trap.
It is. Yes, it does feel like that. And I know, well, I mean, how many times have we all said, like, we wish there was this guidebook to life, right? There is no real way to know that anything we're doing is perfectly right or perfectly wrong. But what I have found in my work and with my experience is that our job as parents is to allow healthy, loving independence in our children. So this would mean something like, if you can do it for yourself, I'm not going to do it for you. I'm going to love and support you and teach you and guide you because that's my job. I'm not going to expect you to just know how to cook things. I'm going to sit with you and teach you how to cook things that are safe for your age and for your skill set. Right? So we teach as needed, but we understand that whatever surfaces from that experience is not ours to control. So we allow our children to experience their lives, and we don't need to manipulate or control the situation. Like, for example, one of the things is maybe my child's friend is bullying them. This is a great opportunity to teach, to guide, to help. Right? To say, well, when I was that age, I had a similar experience, and, people who are hurting sometimes want to hurt others, and let's get to know this person. Maybe this is a skill we need to develop. Maybe we should do this. And then they continue learning that experience at school. Everybody's going to have someone who bullies them. Everybody's going to have someone who doesn't like them. How do you deal with that? That's a really important lesson. But instead, as parents, sometimes we're like, hey, I'm just going to call her mother, going to harass her mother and take her mother to court. And I'm going to steal that lesson. And my child is never going to develop the skill set, the ability to understand other people's pain, the ability to understand not everybody is going to love them or like them, but it doesn't mean that they're any lesser. Doesn't mean that they're not amazing people, right? So we tend to steal instead of teach.
So then you help them to understand where the bullying is coming from, and then you teach them how to punch them in the nose. Right? Or is that bad karma?
Whatever you think is a variant is the proper lesson. I mean, it's all situational. So we do live in cultures where some people, like, that's their answer. And so, I'm not here to judge anybody on their journey. I'm just trying to give an example of how we steal lessons. Wow. And I've done plenty of that. I have a lot of children. So I've been caught up in that process so many times myself, realizing, spirit telling me I have that loud voice. So they call me out all the time. That is what allows me to teach other people. I definitely get called out.
Now, if someone's kind of caught up in a karmic trap kind of thing, I'm assuming there is such a thing where you're not realizing it, you keep kind of burying yourself in a hole because of the circumstances that you're living under. This is something that you help people clear, right? As an Akashic Records guide, past life reader, you can help someone, you read their past lives and help them to understand where their debts might lie and how to get around it?
Well, there's no cheat to karma. But a great example of this might be a relationship pattern. Like, I've had a lot of people come to me who have really deep, powerful relationship patterns that they can't seem to break or snap. And they think it's bad luck. They think it's bad karma. They think that they're here to just suffer and that's it. And they're never going to find somebody who loves and respects them. And then when we go in, we find like this guilt, this heaviness, this repeated pattern, this life, this experience is forcing you to believe you deserve punishment, even though you've already paid that debt. So often we find that this is almost what we call unjustified karma. It's your obsession with your guilt. And as much as you believe you're unworthy, Spirit has said, you already capped that. You already paid it back. You've already learned the lesson. Free yourself, forgive yourself, move on. So if we have a situation where someone is obsessed with their debt, obsessed with their guilt, then they create a cycle of what we would call that trap, that bad luck cycle. It looks like bad luck. They're choosing suffering because they don't believe they're worthy of anything better. So that awareness and that knowledge in itself is a huge unlocking code. We find that people are able to finally pick up and have meaningful relationships and then move on from that pattern and really feel at peace.
Is it just as simple as here's what it was and then suddenly it clears it up? Or is there a process you have to go through to kind of clear that out of your system?
So past life clearing is incredibly delicate work. It can be very dangerous work. We are going into an experience. We have a whole bunch of terms. I do discuss all of these terms in the process in my book Creation, because it is a really intricate process. And the issue or the circumstance with some of this is it's almost like we're doing past life psychology, right? We're doing past life therapy. If you have some deep emotional traumas or wounds in that experience, then surfacing it without properly clearing it, healing it, understanding it, it creates what we call a past life vortex, where you're now reliving that life while living your pain on top of your experience. And it creates almost this cluster of deep emotional trauma baggage and problems in the person. And sometimes that comes with physical ailments, issues, and pain. So some people think that they can just go in and rip these up in people. And we actually see a lot of really dangerous side effects. I've had people come to me after years of suffering being to people who like dangerously ripped these up and didn't properly clear them. My ability to access past lives was kind of handed to me in breadcrumbs. And, there was some times where we read straight from their life records. There's times where I had to go in and do some healing and some work. There are times where I had a support system or other guides. There are lives I'm not allowed to touch at all. If the trauma is so severe that surfacing that life would not bring healing to that person, sometimes I'm told to just leave it and not touch it and not experience it for them. So I have to take direction. It requires a heavy self-control process. It requires a deep compassion for the person and their experience. I actually went to school for psychology, so I'm able to use some of those skills in managing and working with these past lives or these traumatized versions of this person. It's also something I've developed, a skill set I've developed over many lives, right? I have tons of lives where I was working with psychology, therapy, and understanding the human mind and emotions. So it's a delicate process and it can be very difficult. And we are really just scratching the surface in how powerful this could be for someone.
Now, have you ever been in a situation where you're kind of going into the past lives and you realize that this person hasn't paid their karmic debt and that's why they're suffering? And if so, can you do something to help them with that?
The one example I can think of right now, it's a touchy, very dangerous, it was a very deep trauma for this person. They had a past life where they had done some really terrible things to children. And because of that, they decided they just would not have children in this life. And they're going through infertility and a whole bunch of other things. And essentially it was like, you've decided you couldn't do that because the pain was too severe and the guilt was too overwhelming. Now, the idea is they understood it fully. Because they knew exactly, they felt those emotions. They made sense to them. People ask me this all the time. How do you know these past lives are real? It's mind-blowing how intensely they overlap with our current reality, whether it's the belief systems, the fears, the confusion, the ways of thinking that have somehow still kept in our energy. We have the same kinds of blocks, but we never understood why. Or maybe like you love something, but you never knew why you loved it. Or you hate something and you never knew why you hated it. You just naturally thought it was a part of your character, but it actually occurred in this life and it made sense to you. There's a lot of that surfaces. It is a part of your knowing. It is a part of your conscious or subconscious awareness somewhere. So there is a very deep familiarity that surfaces. So when I bring something like this up and it is accurate, people feel that deep familiarity. They're like, well, that makes sense to me because for some reason I feel like I always knew that, So essentially their debt, their karma, their experience created a life where they weren't supposed to have children. And they did that for their own healing and well-being, because part of that karmic completion cycle meant healing that wound. And that means not triggering or surfacing that wound by having more children in this life.
Right. So here, I'm going to put my skeptic hat on because I got to. That's the name of the show. You mentioned people who our past lives really match our current circumstances in a lot of ways and things like that. What would you say to someone that says, well, if I can't have children and I get a past life reading, then it would make sense for that person to say that I did something bad to kids and that's why I'm deciding that. So could it be backwards? Not that they've had a past life that affected their current life, but really, I don't like chocolate, so I must have had a past life where I drowned in chocolate. Right? Maybe it's just that I made it up because I don't like chocolate, so there must be something in my past life. So maybe we manufacture these things.
I do get a lot of people that assume stuff like that. And my answer to that is always like, we really wouldn't know unless we looked into those lives to see what happened. For example, there was someone who knew that they had been somehow held captive or hostage, but didn't know why or the details of it. But it was this continuous nightmare and fear that they had. It wasn't like they imagined, but it was a pretty traumatizing, horrible situation. So we were able to surface it and say, it's not the same, but it is kind of similar. And the idea with that is there's like evidence. They have physical body pains that are the same. So when I connect with someone, I sometimes never even see them in person. I never see their face. The only information I collect from people is their birth name, birth date, and birthplace. And I use that information to anchor to the soul. And then I pull up the records myself. So when I'm pulling these up, there is no awareness of what you like or what you don't like or how you feel or your life patterns or your behavior or even your nationality or your background. I have no idea. So when people hear these things and how wild they are and how intensely they align to their current life, there is always this like, holy crap. Like, how would you know something like that about me? I don't even know you. And for example, one of those would be like, we had a person who had trauma with her parents and the exact belief system repeated in this life. And they told me, they said, and your mother is the same in this life. She has the same belief system, the same habits, the same words, the same things that she said to you. And I read them all. I repeated them all. And this happened today. And she goes like, there's just no way you could have been sitting with me at 5 years old in that conversation with my mother. She told me those exact same words and they, burned through my psyche. So the pattern repeats in ways that I shouldn't know or shouldn't have access to. You can't Google those things, right? I can't Google random person's childhood trauma.
So you don't have any advanced idea of what it is they're struggling with before you give a reading.
No.
Now that makes sense. That suddenly makes it all kind of click.
I'm a natural skeptic. So to me, it's the only way to do the work because I never want to be led. I never want to be biased. I never want these ideas or even their image or what I think about their body or their face or their nationality to interfere in the message.
That's great. I did not know that.
I actually ask people to not tell me things. That's my favorite thing.
Okay. Like so then what are you going to do now that you know what we look like? We come to you and we say, hey, I need a reading. You can go, I can't do it. You look like, a dude. I can't do it.
I do actually turn people down all the time.
No, don't turn me down.
I don't, if I know too much about someone, I tell them that I'd rather not read them because, there's different kind of support I can offer. I can offer connection to your guides. I can do psychic sessions. I can clear your past, present, or future. Like I can still help or coach people. But at some point, I know too much about someone. And at that point, it's like you're getting constant information from spirit anyways, because it's just, I always say like spirit is my first language. It is all that I do, right? So if you're my friend, if you are a coworker, if you're someone I connect to regularly, you're going to get the constant lowdown in what is going on around us because it's just my natural state, that's just who I am. So they're always getting help. They're always getting assistance. It's not like they're being denied that kind of help or service. It's just a different type of relationship. When I'm working with clients, well, I don't have a lot of people, but I have that kind of relationship with. And when I'm working with clients, I don't need to know anything. I don't want to know anything. And a lot of people will want to pour out and write like a 6-page email. And I've deleted it and said, please don't send me anything. I did not read that because I'm trying to, I need to do this my way. And I don't want any any of that information at this point. And it's not about not listening to people. I tell them when the sessions are delivered, if you want to send that again, you can, but I've deleted it. And it's because I want to make sure people have someone to talk to, right? That's still very important. If you
Gotcha.
want to share those things with me, I want to receive them and be here for you, but not before I do the work.
You said you're constantly receiving downloads, and we've interviewed quite a few people on the show, and a lot of them tell us that they just kind of turn it off. Is that something that you do, or do you just take it all in?
So I have lots and lots and lots of gifts. So the idea is if I was constantly on, if all of my gifts were constantly on, then I wouldn't even know what world I'm in, right?
Right.
Right. It would be really very, very stressful. And part of gift mastery is learning to shut them off. But what we always have is our intuitive connection to our higher self and our spirit team. And those are always connecting with us. They're always guiding us. So the stronger that connection gets, the better you hear them. And it doesn't matter if you're in the middle of the mall or if you're having a conversation with friends or if you're at work or if you're driving, you're going to hear the guidance constantly feeding through. It's like our Jiminy Cricket, it's our natural part of existence. So it's not even a gift. It's our natural connection to our higher self and our spirit team.
You mentioned spirit team. We've heard that term a lot from a lot of different people, and we've heard different numbers of people. Do people have a certain amount of spirit team members, or everybody's different?
This actually,
you want a big team.
I like big teams, so I kind of hoping.
This actually just shifted cosmically not very long ago. This is a new shift taking place this year. So before January, April, anybody could have anywhere from like 4 to 17 spirit guides on their team.
Wow.
And there are some people who are contracted into really big positions and they might have 20, 30, 40, maybe hundreds.
What?
Like, for example, I clear huge hauntings. For example, Auschwitz. When I read a past life connected to Auschwitz, there are millions of souls there. I pull in my team. I don't do that all by myself. We clear the whole land. We don't just leave it there. We don't just leave, all these suffering beings. If we're anchored there, I see them, we clear them all. We help them find peace. We move on. I bring in the team. So I need a bigger team. So it depends on what we're doing and how we function and what those guides are here to help us accomplish. But since January, we've had this massive rip up and reconstruction of our connection and everything else, where essentially we've said, hey, this isn't really working. A lot of people are still having a hard time connecting. We need to awaken people. We've had these huge shifts in awareness happening globally. I think everybody's been aware of how that feels. I mean, at one point you were a skeptic, right? And now you're more of a believer because those shifts in those waves of awakening do shock your system. And you're just like, I can't question these things anymore. They become such a deep part of my reality, my everyday experience. So these waves awaken people. Part of that was it wasn't doing enough. So we've come into a guide reconstruction and uphaul where now people have 7 guides minimum. So you have your first in command. Your second is your connection to your higher self. It amplifies your connection to your own soul. And we have a couple of gift guides. We have a life weaver, and then we have protection. So something that can help us protect ourselves from lower level energies, bad energy, or whatever it is, people that that don't have our best interests in mind, or negative energy, or whatever it is we need protection from. So we now have a basic 7 guide structure, but that changes person to person still, meaning, like I said, like I have more because I need more. We do more. We have a lot of spirit work that we do. If I'm working with my students, for example, the second someone signs up as my student, they're like, oh, well, I keep dreaming of you. We do a lot of work in spirit. So when you've decided to work with me, we're doing most of that in spirit. That's my spirit team. My spirit guides are working with my clients in energy and in the physical. And that would only really make sense because we're spiritual beings first.
Super interesting. Oh.
And it sounds very structured and like there's like a hierarchy. Is there like one spirit that rules them all, or like, how does that work?
The guide structure?
Yeah.
No, well, we do. So the only reason we have a first in command is because it would be chaos to hear 7 voices in your head all the time.
Yeah.
So the idea is first in command manages commands, right? First in command leads the show. And usually that is the guide we've had since childhood. So many times people just don't even listen to that voice because they assume it's them, your inner monologue. That's our guide. them. So a lot of people come to me like, oh, I've never heard them. I can't connect to them. I'm like, they're literally always there. They're there so much that we've learned to take them for granted and we don't even know what they are or what they're trying to tell us. We also see that if you have a lot of trauma and self-sabotage and abuse, you might hear those voices, the voices of people who have hurt you or didn't believe in you or said you weren't worthy, right? Those are not our guides. That's our pain and our trauma. And that's why healing allows that clarity and a powerful connection. So the more we heal, the more we can divide those two and we can create a strong inner monologue versus a lower vibrational trauma pattern.
So it's like for me, Karen, Mariana is my chief of staff of my spirit guides, right? That's what we were told. So that's what makes sense. So a lot of people believe that time is not real, that all of our lives are happening concurrently with each other, all at the same time. So my first question is, A, do you believe in that? Do you subscribe to that theory? And B, if you do, if you're clearing things from past lives, how does that work? Because you're clearing them in this life, but we still have them in our past lives, right? But it's happening at the same time. So how would that work?
So my process, for example, if I was working with you and I go into a life, I'm going into your energetic field and I'm following. So our energy, if I were to look at your energy altogether, what we see is your soul looks more like an onion. It's got these layers. And what we do is we actually go into the layer with the most disruptions and we find, oh, that's this life. Let's pull it up. Let's see it. In that life, we see all those disruptions. We heal, we clear them. In the process, we allow a lot of awareness, knowledge, and a lot of new information. And you can say, hey, I repeat that pattern. Now I understand this pattern better. And now I can change my behavior here because this wound has been mended and healed. This person, this being, this life has found peace, right? So we change our lives through new behavior because of this awareness. We know the pattern, we can change it. When we're going deep into this experience, I have to be present. There's a part of me that has to be present there. I am there in that life, in that experience, because I'm reliving it for you. And I'm kind of like the buffer to that. So in a sense, we are really creating what we call like a timeless fifth dimensional experience. It actually does feel like time travel. And I try to tell people that all the time. It's difficult to comprehend with the human mind because you want things to be past, present, and future. But in this work, it's all happening now because it isn't connected to any time or experience. If you have extreme trauma in this life, for example, a terrible example, when I was doing my own healing and I was mending some childhood trauma, Spirit had told me to go visit all the places that I'd struggled and suffered. And I went to this apartment and I was with my mother. I was probably a year old when we lived in this apartment. There's no way I would remember what the apartment looked like. I was helping my mother heal her wounds. She was in an abusive relationship. And she looked at me and she said, I have no idea where this apartment is. I literally couldn't tell you. Everything's different. Everything's painted. This park wasn't even here. It was 34 years ago, maybe 30 years ago. So I just can't remember, Jessenia. And I said, it's this apartment right here. And she said, how would you know that? And I said, I still see you. So you are still jumping out of this window, running across this porch, going down here and running up the stairs. You're in the trauma loop. You have left residual imprint in that apartment. She went over and she couldn't believe it. She said, that's the freaking apartment. You're right. That's the window. That's the apartment. That's the number. That makes sense. So what she had done is this really traumatizing experience left an energetic imprint in the house. And somebody else might have viewed that and thought it was a haunting. She's actually still alive. So it wasn't a haunting. So she was pulled back to that memory over and over and over again because a part of her is stuck there. A part of her is still, she died in that apartment. She was resuscitated. So it was an extreme trauma. So the evidence is I shouldn't know that. I have no idea where that was. We weren't even in the same town anymore. And here I am. I can see the whole thing. I could even see the nightgown she was wearing. So she was able to clear it. She was able to say, I'm going to go in and reclaim that piece. I'm going to go in and take ownership again and allow her to be free. I'm going to send her love and compassion and remind her that she's no longer in that loop or in that moment in time. So we do this also in past lives. So when I'm going in and I'm reliving these moments, I can pull out the residual energy and do the exact same thing. I'm healing that imprint they have left on the world in their suffering, in their deep, deep emotional pain. And then sometimes, even more interesting, sometimes these lives are haunting. And I like to explain to people that we are all a fragment of our higher self. So instead of being like a whole soul, we are actually more like drops to the ocean. And that means that multiple drops can exist at the same time. So we have this idea that time really doesn't exist, because if we can have multidimensional experiences and some of those experiences are even overlapping, then it really does blow our sense of time. And in that sense, like we do have some of these fragments that never return home. And then so parts of us can actually be haunting here on earth. So sometimes part of the healing is I've sent them back home for healing. I've put them back where they belong and they found peace. So it's a big, confusing process, but in the end, it does kind of mess with our idea of, but there are ways, this is intricate life planning. There are ways that spirit has to manage the idea of time, meaning like we can't do certain things if it's not in alignment with the linear processing of the brain. There are times where spirit has to align to the human illusion of time, even if it's technically more fifth dimensional and a timeless experience in space or in the cosmos or in life planning. So they have to work together. We have to understand the theory on both ends.
Gotcha. So have you ever run across someone that just refuses to accept what you are reading for them? That says, no, that's wrong. You're wrong. What's your track record? How successful have you been?
I'll tell you, I actually just had this conversation right before the podcast. I have never had anybody say that's just not in alignment with my belief system, and that's not something I understand. I have had one person question some things, and it was really interesting because their therapist was one of my clients. Their therapist sent them to me, and their therapist reviewed all the sessions. And then the therapist was like, oh, that's absolutely who she is. We've reviewed all your sessions live here. So you need to, just keep working at it. And she kept booking sessions, and she eventually admitted that she was in denial with some of her patterns. But that's the only incident I've had where I was kind of, I was shocked. I was like, oh my God, what do I do with this? I've never had this surface, And then that's when the therapist was like, no, we've reviewed these all live. That's absolutely who she is. She's just having a hard time accepting that because there was a lot of trauma with her identity. So that's the only experience I've ever had. I've never had anybody say that they just didn't understand it or get it or it didn't resonate with them. I have had questions. Obviously I love questions. I would say questions are necessary. I love questions. I ask questions all the time. I'm a very curious person. So I definitely encourage questions. It's a very difficult process. Like I said, it's multidimensional. It's deep. It's some heavy work. And then with the questions, honestly, some of the questions are more superficial. Like people want to know about when in time it occurred or what they were wearing or what color their hair was. And I sometimes am able to share that. But like I said, if you remember how I explained the process, if I'm deep in an emotional wound where let's say I'm being choked alive, and there's not a calendar on the wall that says like 1972 Europe, then I don't really have that information. I'm there to clear the wound and to get out.
Sure.
I can tell what they're wearing. I can share with you what they're wearing, what the buildings look like, what they're doing. Sometimes I do this thing where I'm allowed to have this third person perspective and I kind of rise above like bird eye view and I can tell where in the world that is. I can tell what continent it's on or where in that continent this person is, right? I kind of leave and then I come back and say, okay, so this is Europe. And we can tell by the clothes and the time, we can pick up a time frame. Mm-hmm. I've learned a lot of really cool things that way, being observant, meaning like how buildings were made. I learned how the pyramids were made. I learned how, the science and technology was, because I am very curious. So I do look around while I'm there. But there's like, if I'm not looking for it in the life, then I can't go back and review some of those details. The idea is not to obsess over the experience. The idea is we go in to heal, right? And we go in to clear it. And when it's done, it's done. We don't want to keep playing with that wound. We want to let it heal. We want to let it pass. We want to keep focusing on this experience. And that's a big, huge, important part of it. Sometimes we get so obsessed with the idea of this past life journeying that we forget the only reason we do it is to heal and be the best version of ourselves in this life. It is not to obsess over the details or the what ifs or the could have beens. It's to really strengthen who we are in this experience here today physically.
And I would imagine for some people, it can be pretty tough. Like you're talking about the person who their past life, they had abused children. I mean, I would not want to hear that about me, so I'd imagine you get some pretty strong reactions.
I had a horrible session today that was really emotional, and it took, I cried. It was a very emotional, I have to relive the life of the person. I act like a buffer. So it was a really difficult, awful experience. And I definitely got emotional with it. And then it allows me to clear it, right? Because if I'm at peace now, then that means that individual is at peace. So it was a difficult life. And the idea is that the people completely understand the wound. They really do. So if anything, it's the first time they finally feel heard and seen at the depth of that life or that experience. So they usually don't react negatively. It might be overwhelming and sad, and you might need some time to properly heal the emotions that come with it, or even grieve. But it's deep soul work. So there is a whole bunch of homework that comes with it. And I expect people to follow through with the homework. So part of that is allowing yourself to grieve and feel and then release and then forgive yourself. But I try to remind people all the time that we are beings of experience. The whole purpose of Earth is experience. If you know that murder is wrong, guess what? It's likely because you've done it and you've dealt with the guilt and you don't ever want to do it again. There's a reason you have a strong reaction to that. It's because you've been involved in that somehow, whether it's being a victim or accidentally hurting someone or tragically murdering someone. You understand the repercussions of that behavior. You understand the repercussions of that action because you have lived it somewhere. So we are beings of experience. So the idea is we've all done these things, and that's what allows us to understand it so deeply. And when we heal it, we come into a place of compassion and non-judgment. We come into a place of deep soul level understanding where we can now heal and help other people through some really deep stuff. That's where the whole concept shadow work comes into place. Shadow work is those deep subconscious belief systems and pains and traumas that we are so scared to surface because we're so scared of that judgment or what people think of us or what society might say about such an awful thing that we carried. And many times when we surface it, we realize it really wasn't as scary as we imagined it. And the idea is you bring light to the shadow, right? You surface it, you share it. You have somebody understand your wounds deeply and therefore clear them and bring peace to them. You are never going to heal a wound by guilting yourself and calling yourself bad names and telling yourself what an awful person you were. You only heal it through compassion and love. So we have to go back and say, hey, I might have done those things, but it's time to release that, to love that version of me and to give them the opportunity to make peace with that through corrective action. Because guilt is never going to solve anything. Guilt is never going to bring peace to that. Guilt is never going to help me grow or find a solution to that issue. So as much as we might want to stay stuck, sorry about that. As much as we might want to stay stuck in that type of experience or in that guilt or in that self-sabotage, it's really important for everybody to know that it's not actually ever going to be a solution. Right? The solution is forgiveness. The solution is completion, doing others, making peace with it. So karma.
Back to full circle. Nicely done, Jessenia.
Yeah.
All right. So you do this for people, but I do know that you are pretty backed up, at least from what I heard during the lecture. You're pretty backed up with people who are seeking your services. But if someone was willing to wait and they wanted to reach out to you to ask you to help them with this kind of thing, what's the best way for them to do that?
So my Akashic reports are booking, I think, March next year, but I do have Zooms that are booking this year still. There's a bunch of options on my website, but the best way is always my website. So that's my name, JesseniaNezalillo.com. And I'm on a bunch of social media pages as Soul Architect Jessenia. So I'm at Facebook, Instagram. I don't too much with my TikTok, but I'm there. So that's, the greatest way to reach out or to contact me. Website has all my social media links and my email.
Well, we're going to go ahead and add those links to our show notes. So if you're listening to this on your phone right now, just hit that I information button. You'll see the links directly. You can just click it and you can get connected to Jessenia immediately. If you're listening to this on the radio, you can always go to skepticmetaphysician.com. On her episode page, you'll find the same links there so you can actually access them directly. She mentioned very, very briefly, very slightly, her book, right? We'll have that link in that show notes as well if you're interested in finding out the book that Jessenia wrote. So I don't have the words to say thank you enough for coming on and sharing your expertise with us. Mm-hmm. The word karma is a lot more clear, but not any more fun to think about right now. So, but I do appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It was really fun.
And thank you for coming along on this journey of discovery. Did you know someone that could benefit from hearing the message we just shared on the show or any of our others? Well, we'd really love it if you do them a favor and us and share the show with them. It's super easy. You might just help change someone's life. And if you miss something, not to worry, all of our shows, including this one, can be found on our website, skepticmetaphysician.com, where you can also watch the videos or even send us email or voicemails directly from the site. You can actually even subscribe to the podcast there as well. We absolutely love feedback. We'd appreciate hearing from you, but that's all that we have for you for now. We'll see you on the next episode of the Skeptic Metaphysicians. Until then, take care.